let's have a quick look at the instructions. And so we're going to work through. What I'm going to do first is I'm going to build this cockpit. Now I'm going to need to paint this as we go. So I'm going to build this up to here, applying the decals or decals to the instrument panel. So it's pretty flat detail, but it's closed up, so it won't really matter. We're going to paint this pilot, and obviously with a question mark, that means you've got an option here whether or not you want to. And then we're going to come in and put the fuselage halves together. Okay, so let's get the bits off the sprue and get cracking. So first of all, looking here. Now, sprue cutters and cutting your bits off the sprue. Obviously what you've got with a piece like this, what you want to do, you've got the flat edge of your sprue cutters, and trying to get that as close and as flush as you can. Okay, just give that a little clip. Okay, and then the same again, and then come in at the top. So obviously what you want to do is try to get as much off as you can without damaging the part. Okay, and so there we have, but we still have little bits where it was attached to the sprue. Okay, and so we're going to need to come in and, using a sanding stick, just give that a really light rub. Now it's really important when you're sanding not to push too hard. Okay, try to let the sander do the work. My dad always used to tell me when I was cutting things with a saw, you know, let the tools do the work. I don't quite know how that works because they're inanimate objects, but I sort of understand now that you just with a bit of patience, you just give it some time and don't try to go in there and rush it, because you're just gonna rip up the plastic, especially with this Airfix plastic, because it is relatively soft. So that's the first part, all done and cleaned up. So I'm just going to get the rest of the bits off the sprue. What we've got is quite a delicate little part here. Now to get in here with these, it's possible, but you might end up snapping something or cutting something that you don't want. So in this case, what I tend to do is I get a little bit of white tack, put that down on my bench, and then I just place the sprue over the top. So in this case I've got a little bit of a sprue that I just want to get rid of here. I just put this down onto the white tack, and then using my craft knife I'm just going to come in. Let's just zoom in here. So coming in, what I'm going to do, I'm just going to really carefully just cut in to there. Okay, and it cuts off quite nicely. But what that does, it just helps support things so it doesn't get broken. Okay, and then also the great thing with small parts, you often find that they go flicking off somewhere and the carpet monster eats them, and it takes you, you know, best part of 10 minutes just trying to find the thing. So that's a really good, useful technique. So a little bit of blue tack or white tack, really helpful. We could do the same for the control column. So coming in here. Okay, it's obviously quite important that you have a really sharp, this is an older blade on here, so the sharper the blade, the easier it will be. So here we have all the parts that we need for step 1, 2 and 3. What we're going to do, we're going to come in, we're going to clean up the parts with a sanding stick, and then I'm going to show you about how we paint all of this, okay? See, sometimes when you take it off the sprue, sometimes you can come in here with a knife and you can just cut the bit off. I think the important thing is just really be patient and careful. I know in the old days when I used to just use this, sometimes you'd cut away a bit that you don't want. So it's really important trying to keep the blade flat, trying to make sure that you're not cutting more off than you want. But it can be handy just to get into areas that maybe a sanding stick can't. So that's that seat. Now for some parts it might have a little seam line where the two moulds have come together, and so all I do there is sometimes I just rub just flat blade perpendicular to the part, and I just scrape it along and scrape that seam line off just to get it nice and clean. And when I'm sanding things like this fuselage, I keep it nice and flat. I don't push too hard. I don't want to make any irregularities that make it difficult to get the parts together. So I just keep it nice and straightforward, and I try to keep it as straight and as parallel to the part as possible. It's always important you test fit things before you glue them together. It saves you a lot of trouble later on. So test fitting is a good way of just making sure that everything goes together nicely. Okay, and the last bit that we're going to do now for this, another set which is not vital, but in my old age I find things a little bit more difficult to see. So I'm going to use a set of magnifying glasses that I use. I quite like these because you can just flip it out of the way. It has a little light if you want to get in there close, and I just find these quite useful. So I'm going to come in and just so what I'm going to do is I'm going to put some of these bits together. The main colour here is 145, which should be, if it's correct, a sort of grey, a darkish grey colour. We're going to glue them together and then we're going to paint them. Okay, so first of all, what we've got now, this is where I'm going to show you the beauty of this glue. So if I've got my plastic part here and I'm putting my seat in, now there's two ways of working. Either I put the glue on first and it's very liquidy, so you don't need too much. I often just leave the excess on the side of the bottle. I'm just going to apply that to the area that it's going to be. Now it doesn't matter if you overspill, because this evaporates. As long as you don't touch it, it will evaporate and not cause any damage to the plastic at all. So I'm just going to get that into place. Okay, so that's it. And I'm just going to run some glue where it touched, where the two touch. Now this works as a weld action. So what it does, it when you've got the two pieces of plastic coming together, the glue runs down the gap. It melts both parts of the plastic and welds it together and creates a really strong bond. All right, and so it's fantastic. And the good thing about it is you can, as long as you don't touch it, you can, if you accidentally spill a little bit, if you accidentally get a bit on somewhere where you don't want it, if you just leave it, let it evaporate, it will not, should not damage your model too much. Okay, so we're just going to come in here and put this bit in here. So all I do is I just pop the glue onto where the two parts meet, the seams, and it will just run down using capillary action into all the little gaps, and it will create a really nice strong bond. So that's the instrument panel one. I'll tell you what I should have done first. Now this is where it's always important to look at the instructions. So I've gone and put this on when I should have put these in first, and it shows you here exactly how it should look, and then how it should look here, how it all lines up. And so I need to take that off, and this is why it's really important to always check through your instructions first and try to follow the instructions where you can. That's just me rushing ahead, and which is something I tend to do sometimes. So I'm just going to get this into place. This is where my tweezers come in handy. Okay, that's nice and down in its place. and then we'll come in with our instrument panel. Okay, so that's the cockpit tub all done. We have the pilot. We're going to put the control stick in later. So what we're going to do now is we're going to come in and paint this because it all needs to be just one colour. Okay, so with this kit it comes with 4 colours which give you a number according to the colour that you're going to need on the instructions. So 145 is this colour here that we're going to use for the cockpit. The only thing I would quite like Airfix to do is if they actually named these colours so that you might be able to use them on something else. But these correspond just to Airfix models, so they're not really transferable. In my opinion, they're not the best paints in the world. They're not too bad for a starter. Now I tend to use a variety of different paints. Quite a popular one that people use is the Tamiya, which is great for airbrushing, but not so great for brush work, and this is my paint of choice when just doing general airbrush work. There are other products on the market. Okay, so you get some airbrush specific colours. So this is Vallejo Model Air, quite a good paint for using with your airbrush. MIG make their own version, similar sort of thing. You know, the bottles look almost identical. And then you have stuff like Citadel paints, which is really good for brush painting. I really like this stuff, great for brush painting. And we another one I use is Life Color acrylics, another great one for brush painting. Another one, Extra Acrylics. I find this is quite good for matching, you know, real colours with the aircraft. So this one's RLMO2, and you know, they're really good match. Some people have problems working with it. I find it okay as long as you thin it okay. Then you've got a whole range of other stuff, so you know, from stuff like primers, so this is Stynylrez, my primer of choice, to various others. And if you look at some of my other builds, you'll see some of the paints that I'm using, but we're going to use just the paints that come with the set. I'm not going to use my airbrush. Normally I'd airbrush my models for a really nicer effect, but we're just going to use what's with the kit, and we're going to brush paint it. The only thing I will do, I think, because it just will make a better job, I'm going to come in and I'm going to use a flat brush. You know, the brush that comes with it's great for doing detail and fine lines and things, but if you're laying lots of colour, you really want to get hold of a flat brush. This one isn't really that expensive. You know, they don't last very long, and so I just buy relatively cheap ones, and I just use them. You can see their hairs are starting to fray on this one, but I'm not worried too much about this build. Okay, so let's get going with the painting. So the first thing I do with these, this has a flip lid, which I don't like because it won't stand up and balance, so I cut off the flip. Okay, I'll give it a good shake. It doesn't shake very well, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to give this a really good stir, and this is where these little fellas come in handy. So if you're ever in a coffee shop or in McDonald's, pick up a few of these. They make for really good stirring sticks. And what I'm going to do now, this is where I find a pad helpful. I use my fingernail as a palette as well, just so I can get the right amount of paint on the brush. I mean, the key thing is, and this is where, you know, as a primary school teacher, when I'm teaching children art, the one thing that I get frustrated about is the impatience and the amount of paint they put on their brush. You know, so they'll load their brush up, you know, and they'll try to go in here with too much paint, and they'll just make a complete mess of it. I think the key thing is to build it up in layers slowly. You know, come in with the paint, make sure you spread it around, and make sure you're getting in all the nooks and crannies, but also making sure you're not got any pooling, any paint that's just excess, because it will just make a complete mess of it. Now, you probably could have just painted this separately, but as long as you get in there, it's pretty okay. And most of this isn't going to be seen anyway because of the pilot and the canopy being closed. So that's my first coat. While that's drying, I'm going to come in, and it asks you to paint the inside of the fuselage. So coming in where I know I can see where the cockpit's going to go, and again this side. Now, I don't know if you can see this, but here you can see where the paint doesn't really want to go to the plastic. It's now sometimes when there could be a releasing agent on the plastic, or there could be some sort of excess oils. Some people wash their sprues to make sure it's not contaminated in any way. I've never really done that, and never had any major problems. So I'm just making sure. I mean, obviously a water-based paint like this onto plastic, it does find it a little bit more difficult to adhere to. So the other thing that you could use, and I bought my wife a new hairdryer for Christmas, and so I've used her old one, is using a hairdryer to speed up the drying process. There. So ladies, if you find your hairdryer's gone missing, you know where it's gone. So coming in with a second coat. Now I'm not really taking much care with this because it won't be seen, but again I'm just making sure that I don't have too much paint on my brush, otherwise you just make a mess of it. Okay, so that's that done. So here we have the cockpit, but in this scale it's quite small. I'm building this straight out of the box, so I'm not really going to go to town with any extras. Maybe you've got one of these for Christmas and you want to put it together and you don't want to have too much fuss, so I'm just going to leave it like that. I'm going to show you how to bring a little bit of detail out using the stuff that you have, but we're going to leave it mostly like that.